Hi, folks. Have you ever wondered why you don't get along with a certain colleague at work, or there's this person in your life who just drives you crazy because the way they go about their life just seems so wrong? Today, we're going to be breaking it down for you, the four dichotomies of the Myers-Briggs and how they show up with teams at work and elsewhere. And maybe you already know your Myers-Briggs type, but you're not sure how to best use it when working with your teammates with very different types. We hope this episode will help you understand your own strengths and weaknesses so that you can better collaborate with your teammates and thrive in the workplace and beyond. Welcome to the new Myers-Briggs Question Corner. I'm Edith Richards.
And I'm Mark Maffey.
And we're here to answer your questions about all things personality and all things Myers-Briggs.
From college to careers to relationships, personality is the key to finding the right fit. This is such an important topic for today. Teams and how our knowledge of personality can help us achieve more. It seems like we live in a more interdependent society today. And even after COVID, we understand how important human interaction is. Although many workspaces are moving towards hybrid work, right? And working at home, you can't get away from working on teams and creating the synergy needed to be productive. It is when we discuss MBTI and work, will help me understand how certain meetings will go. So if I'm in a meeting with a lot of extroverts in the room, it's always going to be a lot of ideas being thrown out. It might be all over the place, right? It might be just a rack of different ideas that are being thrown out from different spaces. I have to know that so I don't get frustrated, and I have to work hard to process all the information that's out there. My strategy is to listen, process, try to figure it out, and then give a succinct summary to where we are and what we're trying to do. I love the Zoom option because I can just allow the extroverts to just talk, and then I can just put my stuff in the chat and be able to get that kind of done, right? So, in our interaction it is with like your workspaces, you talked about like how our understanding of the four dichotomies helps us with teams. How does understanding how we work and our personalities, how does that work with teams? How does that work in your workspaces?
Yeah, so first of all, let me just say that I think this is a great way of using the Myers-Briggs, Mark, because, just knowing, first of all, knowing yourself and knowing what your own strengths and weaknesses are, what your preferred means of communication is. I mean, that's always the first step in working with a successful team, right? And then I really like what you said about knowing the personality types of the other people you're going to be working with, because then you can anticipate how this meeting is going to go and maybe where you need to focus your attention, right? So I really like that strategy there that you have. I think it might be helpful for our listeners to just give like a brief review here of the four dichotomies. And we kind of already started talking about the I and the E. This one seems to get a lot of press, the introversion and extroversion dichotomy. And really, I think it's because that's the most visible dichotomy. Are you more of an extrovert or are you more of an introvert? And what this one is about, it's all about our energy source. So where do you get your energy and where do you focus your attention? So if you are an extroverted type, you're going to get your energy more from the outer world than you are from the inner world. And you're going to be energized by being with people and participating in lots of different activities. You might be at your best when you're speaking in front of others or speaking within a group. And you might enjoy networking, meeting new people, working in teams, working in groups. Generally, extroverts have a lot of friends or they know a lot of people, and they may be seen as a people person. So in teams, this might play out by, you might see extroverts talking through a problem with others, because talking things out helps them to understand it better. And I know just before we started recording this episode, we were having a little conversation here, because that's something I do as an extrovert. I tend to kind of talk things out. I might be reading things, and I'm talking as I'm reading. And I know other introverted types have remarked about this before and wondering, like, why is Edith talking to herself here? I don't really understand. Or is she talking to me? So, but it's my way of processing information, and somehow just talking about it makes it real for me. And then also extroverts, because our attention is focused outward, we tend to take action. And sometimes we may take action before we've had adequate time to think it through. And I think extroverts can get frustrated if they have to work alone too long. So they really we do need this interaction with other people, working in teams, working with others. And therefore, we may appreciate a work environment that's a little more fast paced and where there's more multitasking. So that's kind of what it's like, for, generally speaking, for extroverts in the world of work, right? So Mark, you're more of an introvert. So you are going to get your energy more from your inner world than your outer world. And you're going to feel comfortable being alone more than probably I would, doing things on your own, or prefer working in small groups rather than large groups. You tend to be reflective and focus your attention inward. On the other hand, a lot of introverts may wait too long to take action, because you like to carefully consider your actions before you begin something, before you begin a project, and may tend to focus on one task at a time rather than multitasking. And a lot of introverts prefer written communication, working on projects on their own, small groups. Does this sound more like you, Mark?
Yeah, it sounds exactly like me. And and a lot of times when you were explaining the extroverts, I can see my frustrations. I can understand that. And that's why we talked about knowledge of types and knowledge of temperaments, right? And it really, really allows you to get a gauge of knowing, okay, this is what I'm getting into. Like you talked about our interaction that we had before we came on here, and you automatically started to talk your thoughts. Well, knowing that you're an extrovert and I'm an introvert, I totally ignored that. So I'm able to develop these strategies to diminish the amount of frustration that you're going to have with teams. And that's kind of the key. I think everybody wants to get to the same point. Like, if your group comes together and they don't agree on like where they're going, then nothing's ever going to get accomplished. But the question is, when we all agree that we're going to go this way, understanding personality types allows us to move along that trajectory faster, because we're not frustrated with each other, because we know what we're getting. So we know, when you know that you have I's in your group, and if like you're an extrovert and you have 5 I's in your group, like, what's your strategy of dealing with that?
Yeah, that's the question, right? So if we are an extroverted type, like, how can extroverts best work with introverts? So my strategy is to make sure to give the introverts ample time to think things out and think through their ideas or their plans before sharing. Because a lot of, there's that phrase, still waters run deep, right? There's a lot of information there. And I think a lot of introverts can get, especially in a group meeting, get overwhelmed by all these extroverts vying for attention. So making sure that there's adequate time for them to process thoroughly. And then there may be some introverts who don't want to share during a team meeting for whatever reason. So if I'm leading a team and I see somebody's, quiet, I want to make sure I'm giving them space to chime in and just say, hey, I haven't heard from you during this meeting. Do you have anything you want to share? And then if they don't, also checking with them after the meeting. I think that's helpful too. maybe, for whatever reason, they don't want to speak up in the meeting, then they may feel more comfortable talking to you one-on-one after the meeting. So that's something I think a lot of extroverts can do. Just, make sure that you're including them, including all the introverts in the conversations. And then for the introverts, some things that I know that you do, Mark, when you're working with extroverts is you allow ample time for them to talk it out and ample time to process, because that's kind of what we need to do to get things moving.
Yeah. And what I love about this, again, we're trying to see how our different types completes, right? And so the things that we are weak in, so for instance, as an introvert, we're thinking very deeply. So we don't get the breadth of information. So in our brainstorming technique, we might not get as far because we're not throwing ideas out there, because we like to process what's already there and process it deeply, versus extroverts are providing the breadth of things. Like,
Yeah.
here's my thought, here's what I'm doing, here's this. And if I'm an introvert and I don't understand that, and I don't understand how this temperaments work, that can be very frustrating because I'm trying to process things while extroverts are just trying to throw information out. As an introvert that understands MBTI, now what I do is I go, okay, that's perfect. That's a brainstorming session that we're going to have during the situation. Some might stick, some might not stick, right? But the whole idea is we're getting as many great ideas as possible. And now I can say, oh, actually, you know what? What that 18th person said was actually something that we can definitely use. And I can process that information and then try to help, solve the issue, get to where we need to go, provide perspectives, those sort of things that work within my strengths. And that's one thing we've always talked about, is understanding what your strengths are, use that in where you're going. And one of the things I know that introverts kind of like, and I could be incorrect with this, but it's meetings. How do extroverts and introverts, what's their perceptions of meetings?
I think that can be a commonality between I's and E's. I'm not a big fan of meetings myself either. Personally, I think that has a lot more to do with things outside of what the Myers-Briggs measures than the IE dichotomy. But, with that said, there may be some other extroverts who appreciate meetings, who appreciate the chance to come together, again, for a number of different reasons, whether it's, just to share some information and updates, or for more face-to-face communication. Definitely, I would say extroverts need more of that face-to-face communication than introverted types do.
I would agree with that. Here's what I'll say, and I could be, again, wrong with this. And I think you mentioned this, Edith, it could be a lot of things that fall outside of personality.
Yeah.
I think introverts don't mind meetings. Like, we don't mind getting together, processing things and figuring things out and getting really, really deep into stuff. Extroverts, to me, hate meetings. Like, can't stand it. Unless the meeting's about themselves, right? And they get to talk about themselves. But how many times have I heard extroverts, when it's not involving them, that will say, like, all this stuff could have been done in an email. Like, I didn't need when somebody's talking to them and like trying to give them an introduction to stuff. I think when they're allowed to brainstorm and give their ideas on something that's meaningful, I think extroverts do like meetings. But when it becomes a situation where they're not going to be able to voice their thoughts and their opinions, I think that's when they begin to get into a level of like, we could have shared all this stuff on an email, like I could have been doing a lot of other things besides just meeting here and doing that. So sometimes that's my experience I've seen with some extroverts in general.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know what I think it is for me, as you were talking about this, what I was thinking, it's that very word meeting that, I don't know, maybe it gives me PTSD or something. If you change the word meeting to get together or a talk or something, that's going to change my whole perception of it. So there's that piece of it too. But, bottom line, even within the dichotomies of E and I, there's varying levels of varying nuances that are just related to us as people too. And it just shows that, not every introverted type is the same. Not every extroverted type is the same. We all have our own flavors, right?
Man, that's what I love about like the MBTI. You're giving yourself general understanding of how things work, right? But at the end of the day, we're all unique individuals. Like, everybody's not the same, but it gives us some understanding of what environments really work for us and how we can use those environments to fit us and get to our ultimate goals, no matter what that is in general. So that's what I really, really care and like about the whole MBTI. It gives us general clues, but it doesn't mean that we're typecasting anybody into any certain type of,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is who you are.
For sure. Yeah, we don't want to do that. But then, also there's three other dichotomies here. And I know the E and the I, it gets a lot of airtime just because of what it is. But this second dichotomy is also, I think, super important because it relates to how communication begins, how we communicate. And this is the SN, sensing intuition. And this is about how we absorb information. So for our listeners who are tuning in who prefer sensing, so you may pay more attention to input from your five senses. You probably have a preference for focusing on what is current and real, like facts and important details. You're realistic. You come up with practical solutions to problems. On the other hand, you may not see future possibilities as easily because you're so focused on the past or present facts, right? For our intuitive friends, if you prefer intuition, you may prefer information you get through associations, and you pay attention to meaning and patterns. You look at the big picture before the facts. Intuitives are the folks who value innovation and creativity, probably looking to the future and possibilities more than to the past. And I'm going to say we, because Mark, you and I are both intuitives here. You may sometimes underemphasize making these possibilities a reality because we're so focused on what could be. What's real is, at least for a lot of intuitives, I think boring by comparison, at least it is for me. And personally, I think that this dichotomy can be especially challenging in teams because this is where, as I mentioned before, communication really starts happening. We can have a sensor and an intuitive, each looking at an object and describing it very differently because they're each paying attention to very different things. And Mark, you and I being intuitive types ourselves, I think we're going to come into a teamwork setting with a lot of abstract focus. We're not going to consciously define the steps that are needed to get from point A to point B because we naturally leap over all these steps and reach our conclusion in a kind of non-straightforward way using our gut or our sixth sense or our intuition here. And this can be confusing for someone who's a sensing type because sensors need these details. They want to see a practical application of the information that we give them. They want to see a logical sequence. They want to follow things in a step-by-step fashion. So we may want some type of deeper meaning. Being intuitives, we want to extract meaning from things where there may not be any meaning to extract. And when we have to remember this, when sensing types are communicating with us, they stick to the facts. They present the facts. This is what it is. What you see is what you get. There's often no hidden meanings there for what they're saying.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point about the communication aspect and how we communicate. A lot of times I see this when you're dealing with sensors and intuitives is how they tell stories, right? Like one story from a sensor would be very detail oriented. We started here, we did this, we did that. Versus an intuitive might have different ideas and different facts and might talk about how that story might fit into today's world and that sort of things. And so we're very abstract in that as far as an intuitive. And so how we communicate can be very, very difficult because we're looking at things in different perspectives. And that can be very challenging in a meeting. But again, going back, understanding that will be important. If I understand that I have a sensor in the meeting, I need to be highly detailed. Like they want to know this is going to work. Like they're not against innovation, right? They're not against moving outside of the box, but you need to prove to them that sort of stuff would work, right? Like this is how I've had experience with this. This is how it was proved in this side of things. Like, this is the best practice here. And I think they're willing to go along with it as long as you show them proof that these things can work because they're kind of in the here and the now. They're into what things have been proven before. just
Yes.
doing things just the normal way. And so as long as I understand that's what they need, I can provide that for them. But if I don't know that's what they need, I can be frustrated by their unwillingness to try things and to be different, right?
Yeah, yeah, I really like what you said there about them needing proof because they go by experience. Like experience is the proof that they need. So there's a saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think that very much applies to a sensor. They're not going to be looking for some kind of new approach naturally. And breaking it down, I think that's very helpful for the sensors. And this is where I see a lot of intuitive types really missing the mark when they're working with a sensor. You have to slow down and break it down step by step. So you go from it's almost like you're solving like an algebra problem or something. Well, there I go with my intuitive kind of metaphor here and pattern. But I think it's helpful to share with other intuitives what works when you're working with a sensor. Start with what's real, and then step two, and then step three. Just go in a logical sequence and break things down for them. And I think that can help a lot with the communication challenges. And then if for our sensor friends who are tuning in to work with we intuitives, I don't know, Mark, I would say give us some latitude for exploring some creative ideas. Let us start with the big picture first, and then we get into the details. Just be mindful of the fact that we may go off on tangents, and if you can help us to come back to reality, I would appreciate that.
Yeah. It's I love how you said this, right? It's the idea of appreciate us. Like appreciate. I think a lot of times intuitives feel like they're not appreciated in this society. Nobody wants to get in deep with them or wants to think on this abstract level. But I think from a sensor standpoint, if I were to be a sensor, I think I would allow my intuitives to brainstorm and provide their ideas because that's exactly the idea we might need to solve the problem. But I would keep guardrails on them based on the goal that we're looking for, right? Don't let them go off in a
Guardrails.
tangent because like they'll go into another universe, like
Yes.
if you don't keep them, they say, hey, we're still going to remain on Earth here. Like I love that. That's like a Mars idea. Like
Yeah.
that's more of a Jupiter idea. Like
Yeah.
we're looking for more Earth solutions. So can we keep our ideas into Earth solutions, right? I think that's how you can keep us kind of guardrailed a little bit.
I love that. I love the guardrail analogy there. That's excellent. Don't let us go over the guardrail here. Excellent. Okay, and then we move on to the third dichotomy here, which is how we make decisions. So this is thinking or feeling, T or F. So starting with thinking, people who prefer thinking look at situations from the outside and analyze them, making objective, logical decisions. So if you are tuning in and you are a thinking type, honesty and fairness are very important to you, and this can support you in a leadership role. We see a lot of thinking types who aspire to leadership roles. It may help you, for our thinking friends here, to become aware of times when you may come across as uncaring or insensitive to others. And we hear from a lot of thinkers that they need to work on developing more empathy and being a little bit more personal when the situation allows. And Mark, you and I both prefer feeling, which means that we make decisions based on the impact on other people. We tend to be personal. We take other people's perceptions and feelings into account when we're making decisions. And I think for both of us, we both come across as warm and caring people. We place a lot of importance on maintaining harmony. And typically, feelers don't like conflict. We may try to please everybody. And this can be a hard lesson to learn, especially if we're working on a team, because the reality is we can't please everybody. We can't please everybody who's on the team.
Boy, being a feeler on the team, it's tough, right? Sometimes I envy the thinkers. I wish I could make decisions where we can just go with the goal, just be able to look at the data and just say, and in order to deal with people's feelings, just be like, well, this is what the data says and make these decisions. I wish I could be that, but I can't like I have to see people win. And I think one of the things we've always talked about between the two dichotomies here, between the thinkers and the feelers, is I think thinkers are looking for the win. Okay, what's the best way to figure out how we can get there? Okay, and once we get there, that's it. That's the best decision that can be made. I think for feelers, we care about the win-win. Like we want to win, but how does everybody win from this? Like we can win and everybody feel good about that. We can reach our goal and everybody feel good about the goal that we've reached. And I think thinkers like that too. I don't think thinkers want to walk around feeling like they've essentially, pardon my French, but screw people. Like I don't think anybody wants to have that feeling. I think thinkers are willing to do it because they feel like that's the best way to achieve the objective or the goal that they have set out. But I definitely feel like if we can convince them that this is a win-win situation for everybody, I think they're willing to go along with that too as well. But even from a feeler standpoint, it is good to be reassured, not necessarily reassured, but just that it's reemphasized that here's the goal once again, and this is the best way to reach a goal. And sometimes people are going to be hurt in that process. Not everybody's going to win in that process. So like to me, it's like, where's that happy medium? Like, where can we reach the goal, but as many people feel good about this before we leave the meeting? That's kind of where I'm at a lot of times when I work with teams.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I like the win-win there. And it's hard. It's hard being a feeler in the corporate world, really, in any team, because yeah, we are looking for the best in people. We don't want anybody to get hurt. And we often get accused of being too sensitive. And, I have to admit, I kind of take offense at that, because it's not that I don't feel like I'm being overly sensitive. I feel like I'm watching out for people and what's best for people. And whether you're a thinker or a feeler, you still have the ability to empathize with others. Empathy may not come as naturally to some thinkers, but they still have the ability to empathize. And just like we feelers, we have the ability to reason logically. And the fundamental difference here is our values. It's about what do you give priority to? For thinkers, they're giving priority to truth and justice. For feelers give priority to relationships and affirmation. I think you mentioned that affirmation there. And, when thinkers are saying things like, just why are you taking it so personal? It's not meant to be personal. But to a feeler, everything's personal. So it's easy to see where miscommunications can occur here.
Absolutely. As you were talking, I'm thinking a little bit about what the core essence is to this particular dichotomy, and it's how we come about making decisions. And that's why I appreciate my thinkers, because sometimes if you have too many feelers in a room, like we never come up to a decision. Like we're just, because everybody doesn't feel good about it, right? We don't feel right. So we move on to the next day, and we don't feel like, so eventually somebody's going to have to make a decision. Like sometimes you say we're going to go to a restaurant, right? And you got a bunch of feelers in the car. We're not eating tonight, right? Because people don't feel right with that decision that's being made. Occasionally, you need to have thinkers that are able to say, this is the decision that we need to make, because that's what's best in general. And I know that everybody's going to feel good about it. We'll go to your restaurant next week, or we'll go to your restaurant tomorrow, right? But it's good to be able to have that, because they want to make a decision, and they want to make the decision that's best, right? And I think that as long as feelers feel like not everybody's been wronged by that decision, we're good with it. So again, it allows us to work together, and how we work together, although we're opposite, allows us to get the best results out there. So I think it's good for us to understand that there isn't any good or bad in all these economies. We just work differently. And it's because of that difference, we're able to come up with the best solution for everything that's needed.
Right, right. And for our thinkers here who are tuning in, who want to understand a little bit better how to work with your feelers on the team, I would suggest try as much as you can to avoid being judgmental, and then try as best you can to see things from the feelers' point of view. So just start to practice the empathy there. And believe me, this is a good strategy. This is going to help tremendously with the teamwork. And then the other thing I would suggest is if you're trying to make a decision, try to train yourself to think about how that decision will affect other people. What are the results of that decision going to be and the effect on other people? So that would be helpful, I think, for our thinking friends. Like for the feelers, these are just some things I've learned to do over time. And I still struggle with this, Mark. I don't know about you, but I still struggle with not taking things personally. Even in a work environment where I know it's not meant as personal, or if I'm getting some type of criticism, it's hard not to take that to heart. But I think I'm getting better. I think I'm developing a thicker skin, and that was needed. That was needed on my part.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to exercise my thinking brain more, especially when I'm at work. And I also have been working on expressing myself in a succinct manner. So I don't always have to justify my decisions, right? No, full stop, we're not doing this. And then also talking about like taking all the emotion and feeling out of things and just focusing on the facts and the pros and the cons and the costs and the benefits. That's also been helpful for me.
I think those things are really good, just even for the feeler, just for us, right? Like we can be overtaken by our emotions and processing things and justifying. Sometimes these thinking strategies are just really good social emotional strategies for us, right? Like you said, you don't have to justify your
Yeah.
decisions that you make. Like that's good for you to understand and to know, like these thinking strategies, like don't take what everybody says personally. Like one of the things I always tell, I mentioned how I'm a school teacher, and a lot of times I'll tell the kids, like the people in your inner circle, like that's whose opinions you should be valuing. Like somebody you don't even know, their opinion of you, that shouldn't matter. So sometimes using some of these thinking strategies is really helpful from us from just that standpoint, because again, without those guardrails, we can really go off the reservation, and we just don't really, really want to do that from
Yeah.
that standpoint, because again, what's the goal? The goal is to make a decision. And if we are constantly in our own emotion and our own feelings, then we're not going to make the right decision in general. So it's good to have thinkers help us with that. So again, we're different, but we help each other get to where we need to go. And the same thing for the thinkers. Nobody wants to be that individual who's by themselves. Like, I don't know if you guys have watched the movie Air, right? And it was probably a poor representation. It's about Michael Jordan and Nike. And it's probably a poor representation, but Michael Jordan's agent, David Falk, at the end, he says, he was talking to somebody, a representative from Nike, and he said, when this is all over, I'm going to sell my business for like $10 million. And then I'm going to be at a table by myself, like eating by myself, because he talked about he doesn't have any friends. Like, and he valued that. And it was like a sad situation. Like, look, I love your thinking ability and I know it helps us make money, but I don't want you to be by yourself, eating by yourself either. Like, what's the win-win? Like, I want you to win, but what's the win-win? So that way you can have like maybe 2 or 3 people sitting next to you. My dad used to always say he was a head elder in church, and he used to do funerals. And he said sometimes the worst things in life is going to a funeral and there's like 5 people at the funeral. Like how sad that is, right? Because it's about people, right? And so like it's important for thinkers to take on some of these, things that the feelers are giving them, because it helps them become more human, which is what we are, right? So again, we help each other with all of this,
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I see this a lot in the business world here, this lack of humanity. And what I wish that more leaders would recognize is how their decisions and how they go about their work lives here, it really does affect other people, often in a negative way. It's like you're ostracizing people from you. And yeah, do you really want to be that person who ends up with only 5 people at their funeral? Because to me, that's awful. And it just speaks, I don't want to, when I get to be that age, I sure hope that doesn't happen to me, because that means I, didn't leave the impact that I want on the world. So at least that's the way I'm looking at it. But yeah, so moving on though to the last dichotomy here, J and P, judging and perceiving. So this is about how we structure or organize our lives or our outer world. So judging types who are tuning in, our judging friends, prefer a planned and organized way of living, tend to feel more comfortable once decisions have been made before they've been made. If things are up in the air, that can be, kind of nerve-wracking and make judging types anxious. They like to check things off their lists. They have lists for everything, to-do lists, and enjoy checking off their to-do lists. They prefer to be task-oriented. They want order and control. If you are a J or a judging type, you don't like to be late, always prepared, but you might not be as aware of new information because you're so focused on your goal, very goal-oriented people. It might be considered to be a rule follower. And this can be very advantageous at work because the world of work, the business world, tends to be very goal-oriented. But one of the things that judging types may need to work on is being more flexible, being more open to new information. It doesn't do to be so singularly focused on achieving this one thing that you forget to be open to other types of information or other ways of doing things. So if you are a perceiving type, on the other hand, you may enjoy more spontaneity in your life. You may be open to a variety of possibilities. We are driven to be flexible. We may be helpful on teams by offering new approaches or leading change initiatives at work. So we want to stay open to new information. It's more stressful for us when we have that checkbox marked. We enjoy the pre-checkbox time where we're open to new possibilities. So we may need to work on sticking to deadlines and making decisions when necessary. So those are some of the challenges for perceiving types. And, once again, Mark, I think as we are both perceiving types here, so let me first say that it is amazing that we are actually getting this podcast recorded and
No doubt.
completed and published, because let me tell you, this has been a true effort for two perceiving types.
Absolutely. I agree with that, especially we both share the intuitive too as well. So it's
Oh,
always, we're always trying to figure out what else is left. That's
yeah.
when you have N and a P, it's constantly like, oh, we could do this better. How about we do this? Let's just wait till next week, right? So
Yeah,
that's
right.
definitely, but like I tell you one thing, when it comes to working on a team, I'm choosing a judger. Like I'm choosing an individual with a judging percent because I need that. I'm a heavy
Yeah.
P, and I need individuals who are about like getting things done, being organized. Like if you don't know if you're judging or perceiving, just do you have an organizer? Like if you have an organizer, you're a judger. Like if you buy those planners,
You mean like
you
one of
are
those like Franklin planner kind of things where you like,
you're
yeah.
if you got
Yeah.
a to-do list on the side of your thing, you are a judge. And I love that because something that Edith and I always talk about is like we love to think about the possibilities and what can happen, but we need a deadline. Like I always talk about this. Like I'm an individual who I really enjoy. I coach football and I enjoy that because on Friday, or if you coach college football on Saturday or the NFL on Sunday, there's a deadline. You're playing. You don't get to postpone that game to go figure things out, right? And that helps me kind of get myself in line to get things done and accomplished. I think what I can do as a perceiver, not to down perceivers, right? But like what I think I do is just create a level of calm, like in the environment. I was thinking about this right now, and I feel like a lot of times, like our perceivers are like San Diego, right? And our judging types are individuals that are in New York, like busy, want to get things done, has to get done now. And people in San Diego are like, dude, we'll get it done, man. Like, just relax, and like
Yeah.
we'll get everything accomplished. Everybody just relax. Everything's going to be okay. Everybody doesn't need to be at each other's
But
throats. We're going to be fine. Like
that is
that's
like
who I feel I am.
Yeah, but that is like super, super stressful for a judger. I mean, I tell you, I bet there's some judgers who are tuning in right now who are not comfortable with you even saying that.
Oh gosh, I get it. I get it.
But yeah, I mean, and how I've learned to work with them, because I don't know about you, Mark, but I've kind of spent my life feeling like there's something wrong with me because of this darn perceiving preference. Like, why can't I get myself organized? Why can't I do things in this conventional way that everybody else, it seems so easy for other people. And I don't know, I just can't make myself do it. But one thing that's been really helpful for me is thinking about time. And for judging types, if their time is very important to them. So
Mhm.
if you are late to a meeting, that is not a good thing. They don't like that. And they take it as, you're violating their time, or you're not being respectful of their time. And so I've kind of looked at it that way. And I happen to work with a lot of judges. So I've felt myself over the years kind of moving to more judging way of behaving. And when I have a meeting at work or when I'm working on a team, I always try to make sure I'm early, because my lifetime like running late on things. And I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody else. I don't want people like waiting on me thinking that I'm flaky or something like that. So I
Mm,
try to be early, because in the business world, a lot of the time, if you're on time, you're late.
mm.
So that's kind of how I've tried to manage that. And then, a lot of the time meetings will run over, like it's supposed to end at noon, and somebody just has to keep on talking and talking and talking. And so if I'm leading a meeting, I really try to be respectful of other people's time, because you don't know if they have something else going on or whatever. But I always try to say that, hey, this is, we're going to get out of here by noon. This is when the meeting's over. And that's been very helpful, I've found.
No, absolutely. I do agree with you with the time. I think that's something I have to be cognizant of. And like, I don't necessarily think that perceivers are just late oriented. I think a lot of times we end up being late because we're trying to get as much information as possible,
Yeah,
right? Like
absolutely. It's
before the meeting.
unintentional.
Yeah. We're trying to get information. We're trying to make sure that we're doing everything possible. I remember there's a quote by John Wooden, that I think a lot of times for look, like I said, I love my Jays. Like they're the ones I have for groups. If I'm selecting a group
Oh,
and there's a team, I got to get Jays on there because
yeah.
they care about production. But John Wooden used to always say, never mistake activity for achievement. Like I totally agree. Like not
Mhm.
because you're doing something means you're doing something. And I think a lot of times our perceiving friends are looking at the activity of our Jays and saying, like they're doing a lot of stuff, but they're not really accomplishing anything, right? Like we want to make sure if we're going to now jump in the boat and do it, like
Yeah.
we want to make sure that we're not going to look back and say, oh, you know what, we made a mistake. Let's redo it. We don't want to do that. Like we don't want to redo stuff. We want to make sure we got all the information possible. So that way, when we do it at the same rate and level as our judges, we're doing it once and that's it. We're not doing it, then we're, like looking at it and then trying to redo it again. Like we just want to do it once the first time. So we're trying to get as much information as possible, which means we end up being late, which means we end up being chill and let's wait till tomorrow to kind of figure it out. It makes us seem that way, but essentially we're just trying to get as much information to find that. And then when we get a deadline, then we can say, okay, now it's time to go, right? And now
Yes.
we act just like our judges.
Yeah. So I love the deadlines, not timelines, because that's another thing for judges might be mistakenly do when working with a perceiver, especially sensing judges, SJ types, is create a whole like timeline of, from this Wednesday morning, you're going to be working on X task. And then, from 1 to 2, you're going to be doing this and this and this. And I need to see your progress all along. No, that is really not going to be helpful for we perceiving types. We need a deadline, but give us the flexibility for how we're going to meet that deadline.
As we and as I know we're coming towards the end of this episode,
Yeah.
I just really feel like we need to appreciate each other and what we all offer to reaching a goal, because that's the key. Like our key is we're all trying to reach the same goal. We're all trying to get to a common goal, and by appreciating each other's types and understanding how we work, we can get to that goal faster, which is what we all want. We all want to achieve that goal so we can move to the next goal and progress throughout. But if we spend a lot of time just kind of fumbling over our personality types and being frustrated around our personality types, then we don't ever get to the goal. So appreciating one another and understanding how we can provide for another person within that type so they can give us what we need to get to our goal, I think is something that we all try to understand.
Yep. You said it really well there, Mark. It's so true. And it's making me think just, when people are more alike, there may be this unconscious bias to this if you're working on teams or even hiring that, you're trying to find somebody who's just like you. And that's a huge mistake to make, because when there's diversity on teams, that's going to lead to better decision making, and it's going to improve the bottom line for that team. When people are thinking alike, there may be more agreement, there may be more harmony, but the results aren't going to be quite as good. So we all need each other here. So really like how you brought that together. And with that, I am going to say that I appreciate you all tuning in to this episode. And just a reminder here that the Myers-Briggs can help teams and businesses grow stronger by investing in this assessment. And if you're using it with a certified practitioner, it's a great tool to improve communication and motivate your employees and reduce conflict. And I think this is something we can all use more of in today's world. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this episode, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in. Follow us on social media and your favorite podcast platform.
And please reach out to me on LinkedIn and on my website, atopcareer.com, for more updated content. While the Myers-Briggs and MBTI are trademarks of the Myers-Briggs Foundation, viewpoints expressed here are our own.